We preview the CONCACAF Gold Cup, which is set to begin on Saturday with the reigning champions Mexico taking on the Dominican Republic at the SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. Now, here's a refresher of the groups for this competition, the premier competition in the CONCACAF region, of course, and very important for all the teams taking part. The champions Mexico, grouped with Costa Rica, Suriname, and the Dominican Republic. That looks like a pretty tough one. Then over in Group B, Canada, Honduras, El Salvador, and Curacao. Group C will have Panama, Jamaica, Guatemala, and Guadeloupe. Remember, Panama were in the final last time. USA, Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, and the guest team, Saudi Arabia, will be in Group D. Our football analyst, Lejay Williams, is still with us in studio for this discussion. And Lejay, let me ask you, right off the bat, who start favourites for this CONCACAF Gold Cup tournament?
Well, definitely Mexico. They're in very good form coming into the competition. Their squad is very strong. They've even had the luxury of adding Ochoa back to it as a backup keeper just for experience. So this Mexico team, the form that they're in, the quality that they have, especially on the attacking front, with all of their marquee players being in very good form, the Jimenezes, Santiago and Raul. So, it's very strong, and Mexico are pretty far away favorites for me in this tournament.
Yeah, is this tournament more important for the likes of Mexico, USA, and Canada because they're not going through the World Cup qualifying campaign, so they don't have those competitive fixtures to look forward to?
1,000%, and especially considering the context of how each of those teams are coming into the tournament. Mexico, as I said, they've been very strong, but you aren't going to quite get that same level of competitiveness from the friendlies you're playing. And
intensity sometimes.
Exactly. So they're playing well, yes, but they'll want this as a little bit of a litmus test. The USA, they need it for a whole other reason. They just need some form. 4 losses on the bounce coming into the tournament. Mauricio Pochettino under some tremendous pressure. Yeah. Christian Pulisic not a part of the setup that's causing a lot of discourse, not only within the media, but even former players coming in and speaking out against that notion. So USA, they just need to get some wins under their belt. Canada, they've been flying under the radar a bit, I think. But I think a good performance from them would remind teams and remind the world, really, of their quality that led them to the last World Cup as well. So I think it's important for 3 different reasons, but important nonetheless.
Yeah, I know we're going to get to a specific discussion on the Caribbean teams in this tournament, but I want to stick with the USA a little bit because I remember when Jamaica played them in Nations League quarterfinal action. And as part of the analysis, you spoke to the quality of Pochettino as a coach and certainly how in that tie he outcoached McLaren, essentially. Are you surprised as to how much they have struggled in recent months, or is it a case of building blocks and figuring things out for when it's most important, and that's going to be next year?
I am surprised. I am pretty surprised because I obviously hold Pochettino in a very high regard in terms of his coaching. I don't think these results necessarily all fall on him, but it's just strange with the USA. They're just playing a bit weird. I always thought it would be a good fit, the intensity of Pochettino matching with that general US style, but I think that they haven't quite settled on a strongest lineup as yet. They've been mixing and matching. And especially sometimes you're going to see a team filled with MLS players and then the lads from Europe come in. There just isn't that same continuity that we would come to expect, and it's going to be a similar thing for the Gold Cup. So I am surprised at how the reign is going so far, but at the same time, I'm not quite sure how many people from the US watch the show, but the USA and soccer culture doesn't quite go hand in hand at times. Yeah. So often when a progressive coach comes into the setup, there's always these teething pains. They have to hope it's teething pains as opposed to Pochettino just not being a good fit.
Is he in trouble if he doesn't win the Gold Cup?
I think not necessarily if he doesn't win, but the manner in which, like if they lose, the manner in which they lose, if they were to crash out in the quarterfinals or lose to an unfancied team in the semis, I think then it would be some serious pressure.
But if they went to the final and lost to Mexico, you suspect he'll still be fine?
It depends how they lose that as well, because as I said, Mexico very strong. If Mexico comes out and give them a 4 or 5-0 drubbing in their own backyard, it's not going to look good.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people are unhappy with how things are going with the U.S. national team. But in their group, they have Haiti, they have Trinidad and Tobago, and they have the guest team, Saudi Arabia. So, Liz, talk to me about that group in particular and the other countries that you think would put up a fight against the USA.
I think all three teams will put up a very strong fight. I still think that the USA are the strongest team in the group, but as I said, I've always been very fond, or for the past couple of years at least, I've been very fond of how Haiti have been playing football. I think Trinidad and Tobago are a threat against pretty much every team in CONCACAF because of that, the powers that they have up top. It's a different type of quality, especially with Levi Garcia, what he brings to the table. And it's not only in necessarily scoring goals and doing the easy stuff. It's also just a threat of him that forces fear into defending teams. So I think Trinidad will always be a threat up top, especially, but it's going to be difficult for them. And Saudi Arabia, I'm not quite sure how they're going to come into this tournament. I think, they've shown that they can pull off these shock results, but have yet to really have any consistency to go with it. So I can't discredit them or write them off and say that they won't put up a good fight, but I'm still not sure about what they can bring to the table.
Yeah, but it still looks a pretty competitive group. I want to move to the next group now with Panama, Jamaica, Guatemala, and Guadeloupe. I know, of course, you'll have a vested interest in the Jamaica team. And my first question in relation to Jamaica is, do you think now, Lish, Steve McLaren has found some kind of stability when it comes to selecting his squad and, just getting the chemistry within the team?
Yeah, I think so, because if you were to look at the squad for the Gold Cup as opposed to the squad that was just used in the qualifiers, very, very similar. Only a couple of changes. Michael Antonio, I would say tentatively, is back into the squad as well, pending his fitness. So I think that he has found a formula. And one thing that was very interesting from his press conference following that Guatemala game, it was that he said that he's building a squad where if he were to sub out a player, they would still have a similar profile to come in and fill that hole. So that's very, very good for any team that's trying to build something substantial. Because when you look at, say, for instance, a position like, obviously at left back, it's always been this way, but Amari Bell and Greg Lay, they operate in a similar mold. When you look at, I think this is very interesting as well, because although he hasn't played much recently, although being around the squad, when you look at someone like Dwayne Atkinson and then you juxtapose him with Demari Gray, they're two wing profiles that are comfortable on the wing, but they play their best football, or at least he's trying to make Demari Gray play his best football centrally. So I think Dwayne Atkinson can be an approximation of Demari Gray, if needs be, in that central attacking midfield area because of the similarities that they have. Warner Brown, Burrell, very similar players as well in terms of their movement being their key advantage over defenders. So I really like the makeup of the squad, the balance of the squad, but it's still a very difficult group for sure.
Yeah, when we were talking about the World Cup qualifying draw just now with Brent, he had propelled Panama into the same group of a Mexico, USA, and Canada, given their current strength. They have never won the Gold Cup before, but they have reached 3 finals, Panama. I know the Jamaica team is pretty strong at the moment, but would you agree that Group C favorites are Panama?
Yeah, I would, but big caveat, because I remember, a couple of days ago when I was on the show, I was saying that Carrasquilla, Panama's best player, actually CONCACAF's 2024 Men's Player of the Year, he would be a key factor as to why Panama would be thrusted into those conversations. He's actually out for the Gold Cup due to an injury, so that's a massive blow for them. Do I still think that they're extremely strong? Yes, because they have a lot of quality elsewhere and they are a very well coached team. They switch between systems depending on the game. They're very defensively solid and they get numbers in the box. If you were to look at any Panama game and how they score, it's just through having so many numbers in the box when they attack, but still not sacrificing anything defensively. So I think Panama are still a very strong team. Do I think at this current moment they're better placed than this Jamaican team? Yes, but I still can see potential in Jamaica, especially without Carrasquilla, who I think, as I said on, what would that be, Wednesday's show, I think that when he puts on a Panama jersey, he immediately becomes one of the best players in CONCACAF. Without him, I think if the Jamaican players were to step up in a similar vein, Jamaica definitely could get the better of them.
Yeah, and of course, whether you win the group or finish second, quite significant to who you will play in the quarterfinal round of the competition, which is the start of the knockout stage. All right, Liz, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks very much for joining us. Of course, I suspect we'll be chatting a lot next week because
Definitely.
the competition gets going tomorrow. Trinidad and Tobago will open their campaign on Sunday with the Jamaicans playing on Monday. So, yeah, lots of football to look forward to in the coming days. Let's go to a break.